Okay, so now we have looked at so many different aspects of Cars video games, from MMOs to GBA ports to just the truly terrible. Today we are looking at the 4 Cars video games made for the Nintendo DS, which are Cars, Cars Made to National, Cars Race-O-Rama, and Cars 2. This is quite a mixed bag, so get ready for an interesting look at these 4 quite different games. Do you guys enjoy Cars games for the racing? Well, too fucking bad, bozo, because this is a mini-game collection. That's right, the first Cars game for the DS is a fucking mini-game collection. Barely any racing in sight. This version of the game launched worldwide around the same time as all the others did back in June or July 2006, depending on where you were in the world. This version was developed by Helix, who also developed the GBA version of the game that we looked at the other week. I mean, honestly, I'm not actually surprised this does exist, because this was the early days of the DS when everything was about making sure you used the touch controls, and minigame collections were a big thing back then, so I'm not surprised, I'm just kind of disappointed. Well, seeing as we're here, let's just talk about the minigames that this offers. So, the one you're currently seeing on screen is a game where you have to, and I quote here, stroke the cars as they fill up petrol to keep them happy. That's right, stroke the cars. What the hell? You have to quickly tap between the different petrol pumps to make sure you stroke as many cars as possible. I'm really struggling not to burst out laughing whilst reading this, but it's just silly. It's alright, it works, it's just pointless. So next up we have a kind of driving segment where you have to play as that orange muscle car from the start of the first film, who I believe is childishly called Snot Rod. Anyway, you just kind of keep driving, he occasionally sneezes and gets a boost, and the other members of your crew drive past and you have to avoid them. I don't really get the point of the game, and then you kind of just keep driving until you stop. And this one just feels like it goes on for fucking ages as well. Not impressed. So the third minigame I played, it's literally just a memory game. Like, that's it.
I remember this. Almost remember.
There's a traffic light that flashes in different patterns, and you just have to tap the traffic light after the lights have flashed. The only really annoying thing is as the game goes on, the patterns get longer, but the traffic light shakes as you tap it, so sometimes you can misclick on the screen. And I say misclick because I've been emulating this and not been playing it on an actual DS. So it just made it 10 times more difficult. So once you complete these first 3 minigames, you then unlock some more. So the way these minigames work is they have 3 stages. If you fail at a stage, it will just take you back to that stage rather than restarting the entire thing, which is kind of nice, I suppose. Anyway, so the next thing you unlock is an actual race between Lightning and Chick Hicks. Now, I thought, oh hell yeah, racing, this is going to be good. No, it's a very bare bones experience. I was just happy to see some kind of racing, but be careful what you wish for, I suppose. The concept for this one was actually pretty cool. You have to keep an eye on your tyres to make sure they don't burst. You have a boost gauge that keeps coming and going as you use it, and there is actually a pit stop micro game halfway through the race, although I struggled to actually figure it out at first, which is really embarrassing. But yeah, overall, not a great minigame, but it's fine. Okay, so next up we have a minigame where Mac is driving along and falling asleep once again, which is just super dangerous. Anyway, his rear end opens, oh god, and Lightning's trophies start pouring out, and there's 4 different colours of trophies that pour out, and you have to grab them and move them into the... let's try that again. You have to move them into the corresponding colours. This just goes on for quite a while as well, and the game does have a countdown each round, but like, it always hits 0 and there's still trophies coming. I think the game just ends when it runs out of trophies. There are 2 other minigames that I played during my brief time with Cars for the DS, both of which starred my favourite character of all time, haha, Mater. One sees Mater trying to shoot himself up to the moon by driving very fast and also collecting stars for some reason. and the other sees Mater fishing trash out of the river. I'm not even going to waste time diving into these two games because they're just so inherently boring that there's nothing interesting to say about them. And that was all the time I spent playing the first Cars game, so let's move on to something a bit more interesting. Cars Mater National.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, nah, can't take any more of that cursed cutscene. Anyway, this is Mater National for the DS, developed by Tantalus Interactive, who also developed the Game Boy Advance port of this game. If you remember, I was quite impressed by the GBA version, and I have to say I am also very impressed with this one. The GBA version is just a dumbed down version of this DS game. They even managed to put that cursed opening cutscene in as an actual CGI cutscene, rather than just some JPEG images with some text underneath. Don't get me wrong, most of the other cutscenes in this game are just images of characters with text, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not expecting a fully animated story mode game for the DS. Anyway, this launched in late 2007, and the DS version actually had the highest Metacritic score out of the lot, with a very nice 69 out of 100.
Oh, yeah.
For comparison, the DS version of the first Cars game only got a 54 out of 100, which is just pathetic. Now, so far, my only experiences with Mater National have been on the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS, so I don't really have the main game to compare to. Now, I have looked into it, and to be honest, this game seems quite similar to that, minus the open world aspect. The tracks for this game are actually very well designed, there's some cool hidden shortcuts and collectibles to pick up, and honestly, I had a really good time playing this game. It features all the international racers from the main game and who we also saw pop up in the GBA version. There's jumping, there's drift mechanics. Honestly, this game is pretty good. Don't get me wrong, it's still pretty easy, but it's not as easy as the GBA version was. One thing I do have to say though is the model for Lightning McQueen in this game, much like the one on the GBA, is just absolutely fucking cursed. It is cooked beyond belief.
Holy God, what are you showing me? Come on!
Now, whilst I will sing this game's praises, there are also parts, as with a lot of games, that just are far from perfect. There's a couple of courses where the handling feels a bit off and you can very easily fall off the side of a canyon, which I did lots of times because I'm just a really bad driver. But there's also a segment where you have to race Goodmund, and it's at night in a cave. So because McQueen is so cocky and actually has stickers instead of headlights, the player now has to suffer as he wears fucking night vision goggles, which means the whole screen is this awful colour of green for the entire race. I get the idea was kind of cool, I suppose, but in reality it was just garbage. I won't lie, it was the only part of this game that I really did not enjoy. Overall though, Cars Mater National for the DS is a very good game. It's easy, yes it's aimed at kids, but in terms of races on the DS, this is definitely up there with Mario Kart DS for sure. Anyway, that takes us nicely along to our next game in this video, Cars Race-O-Rama. Genuinely, I can't decide which McQueen model I actually hate the most between Mater National and Race-O-Rama for the DS. This game just, I couldn't get used to the way it looks. But more on that later. So this is Cars Race-O-Rama for the Nintendo DS, which was developed by, again, Tantalus. It released in late 2009, and Race-O-Rama actually holds the honour of being the first Cars game I actually made a video on, so I know a lot more about this one than I did Mater National. Now, as you may recall, I absolutely grilled Race-O-Rama the first time I played it and did the video. Now, hindsight has given me some wonderful knowledge in the fact that it wasn't that bad. This, on the other hand, is nowhere near on the same level as the console game is. Obviously, it was never going to be, but it's just something about the way this game looks. it just, I don't know, I can't get on board with it. I don't know how they went from the Meta National graphics to whatever Lightning McQueen looks like here. Now, as you can probably tell from that recycled Chick Hicks joke that I've used in nearly every single Cars video, yeah, f*** you guys, I'm going to keep doing it anyway, the story still is the same as the base game. Chick Hicks' rival racing academy takes yours on. He has some bratty sports car girl, a silent muscle car, a big truck that's voiced by Randy Savage, although there's no actual voiceover in the cutscenes in this game. The bare bones of the game is still there. The tracks are all nicely designed, it has shortcuts, there's stuff to collect, you know the gist by now. As it's developed by Tantalus, this game is very similar to Meta National, and that's a good thing. I personally prefer Meta National over this one as a handheld game, just from the way it looks and the way it runs. Honestly, Meta National runs better than this one. That said, some of the level design is a bit more detailed. There are some reflections that can be seen on the models of the cars, which is actually quite impressive for the kind of game this is and for the platform it's on. But overall, I much prefer Meta National to this. However, Tantalus still did a good job of bringing this game to a handheld platform. I must say the points mechanic in this game is really cool. How you hit top speed, you get points which add up to your boost, how you hit drifts, and just that whole system it's very well done. Obviously it was in Cars Race-O-Rama, but it's done very well on the DS as well. Honestly, I'm just grateful that these two games exist, because the first Cars game on DS is just a joke. So the fact that we got two full console games pretty well adapted onto the DS it's very impressive. So technically, in terms of Metacritic review gatherings, the DS version of Race-O-Rama actually holds the highest score out of all the games so far, but that's only because it's had one review, and that one review was 70 out of 100. For comparison, the 360 and PS3 versions of the game hold 54 and 61 out of 100 respectively. Anyway, moving on to our final game, Cars 2. Okay, so last but not quite least, we have Cars 2. Now, this DS port was actually developed by Avalanche, who developed all the other versions of the game as well. I recently played through Cars 2 on the channel about a month ago, and I had a pretty high expectation for this game to be quite similar, having just played the previous two DS ports as well. What I got was in fact not a port of the console game, but in fact its own thing. Honestly, I've sat on this for a few days now, and I still don't quite know how I feel about this game. It's such a mixed bag that it's hard to really recommend it, but at the same time, it's weirdly impressive for what they were trying to do.
I don't know.
So let me just elaborate on what I mean. The console game very, very loosely follows the events of the film, but it's kind of just you doing missions and races with no real actual purpose except to just progress further through the levels. This game actually follows the plot of the film, where there are actual missions based on such insignificant moments. There's a whole segment on Meta driving to get to the wasabi for the pistachio ice cream joke.
Do not eat the free pistachio ice cream. It has turned.
Don't get me wrong, what follows is a pretty significant moment in the film with the oil spill, which to me overall is quite impressive, but it does mean that there are some incredibly boring and frustrating segments of gameplay involving stealth and almost platforming. I don't know, man. Honestly, I was just hoping for a bit more of a watered down version of the console game, but this is just weird. I do just want to talk about how the cars handle in this game compared to previous as well. Now, obviously, I know this was developed by a different developer, so the handling is going to be different. But my god, controlling Lightning, he is so sensitive to drive around, it's absolutely ridiculous. Perhaps I just didn't play the game long enough to get used to it, but I just found it very difficult to control what he's doing when you press the D-pad and he just turns on an instant. Very sharply as well, might I add. Anyway, let's talk reviews for this game. So the overall Metacritic score for the DS version is 58 out of 100, but there's such a mixed bag of reviews here. They range from 80 all the way down to 41. Some people absolutely despise this game, where other people are really impressed with what it did. I'm more on the negative side. It's definitely got a fair review score, I'd say, overall. but I wasn't particularly impressed, I must say. This again suffers from the same problem as the first Cars DS game, where I want racing in my Cars game. I don't think that's so much to ask. At least that is actually here, but it is just broken up by loads of random segments of...
So, you know, mixed, let's call it mixed reviews.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of our look through the Cars games for the Nintendo DS. What a mixed bunch of games we have here, from the truly awful minigame collections to some actually pretty solid console adaptations. There really is something for everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications for future uploads. And I will see you in next week's video.
You talked up a lot of cars last night. Which one's your associate?
Your mother. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was your sister. You know, I can't tell them apart these days.